Hey everyone, I am Alyssa. I also go by Lyss or Alsira, whichever is okay. If you are new here, welcome. If you're a subscriber or a lurker, welcome back. We will be continuing the analyses of DETHROEZ poems. Reading these out loud, editing them, and illustrating the visuals is a surreal experience. I remember this project being an idea for a poem for a Kaleidoscope, my debut poetry book, and soon expanding that idea into an entire book itself. This book, DETHROEZ, has significantly more poems than Kaleidoscope, and if you can recall, Kaleidoscope's analysis video was about 40 minutes, which is a bit much for my iPad and program to handle.
I am not doing that again! You can't make me!
So I divided up the analyses videos for DETHROEZ into a series, so it's much easier to handle, and every poem has their own spotlight. Part 1 is already posted, so check that out. Disclaimers. Some of these poems will deal with topics such as drug addiction, death of a child, body horror, and other topics I can't think of at the top of my head. If there's more that I miss, I will add them to the screen. Not every poem is reflective of my personal views or experiences. The speaker is not the poet, just like actors are not their characters. Finally, you are free to interpret my poems however you want, just make sure you got contextual evidence. Disclaimers are now done, on with the analyses. Fatal Elations. A series of couplets about not only an addiction, but the high obsession addiction. Like one of my disclaimers, this poem doesn't have to be about an addiction. It could be about something that you were so drawn to and sucked into that you feel yourself being split apart and it terrifies you. One thing I like about the poetry is that not every line has to be a complete sentence or a complete thought. As you can see, some end lines finish with a comma drawing you to the next line. Poetry can be a performance, so you can imagine someone performing this, true to the lines, true to the punctuation, the enjambment, the spacing, and feel that drama in the silence. You may not feel it in this reading. One thing I must apologize for is the background vocalist that is in my air conditioner. It's hot, and I don't like hot rooms.
I never had an air conditioner.
No, that's no reason to kill yourself.
Why? Gets hot at night, you can't sleep? You ever try to sleep in a really hot room?
Every night I sleep in a really hot room. I don't want to kill myself.
Well, I've slept in really hot rooms and I wanted to kill myself.
Room. This is one of my favorites. The theme I had for this poem is trauma porn. Basically, that's when people dig and exploit tragedies of other people for profits or kicks. True crime comes to mind as there are controversial content creators who tend to exaggerate the situation and therefore lie about actual true facts and hurt the victims and their families even more. I won't go into detail. I thought about my childhood trauma and how careful you have to be when you write tragic backstories for characters. And when I was growing up and writing, a lot of my characters went to fucked up shit. Now I'm more than 10 years older than I was before, and my characters have grown with me and don't have such tragic stories. That doesn't mean that they're not good characters. The beginning and end of Room have another thing I tend to do, which is inverting the same lines. These lines were inspired by a song called Damaged by Fit for Rivals. Sometimes writers tend to add a disclaimer on what inspired a certain piece in the text. I learned from a poetry class I took in my undergrad that listening to music while writing poetry is not always a good idea, because then you end up writing in that melody and another version of that song. I remember my professor pointing out a word I used in a poem, and that word was vilify, and I got that word from a song I was listening to while writing that poem, Worship Decay by Silosis. Coming back to the poem, the speaker takes his writer, who is exploring this abandoned house, on a trip through a horrifying lane, and why we shouldn't wake up spirits in their resting place. Even before DETHROEZ, I wanted to write something that just went right into that horror scene. A few years ago, I was reading into this topic about trauma porn, or explaining someone's trauma, and I remember being upset when I would tell people that I had childhood trauma and they would joke about it. Of course, these were online chat rooms. I was a teenager and I took everything seriously. I didn't stop until I was 22. There's always this pressure for what makes a poem, and it has to be metaphorical but still literal. It has to be this beautiful language, but don't go too lavender. and it has to be straight to the point, but let the people think for a moment. When I was writing Kaleidoscope, the pressure was a little high. For DETHROEZ, I said fuck it. I don't have to follow that structure to be seen as a poet. Hell, I wrote 2 poetry books. Is that not enough? Enough about that rant. I took some time with this poem because I didn't know how to end it. Of course, I had to explain who was haunting this writer and wasn't the speaker. I made it about female rage and the performance of being a woman and a people pleaser. It's tragic, I won't lie, and I think a lot of people will relate to this. I needed a send-off. Daisy! Who's ready for a sad story? In these tercets, it is springtime, and a butterfly is enjoying some nectar until, boom, it struck and falls into the stream, where it stains the cool blue water into blood. I probably wasn't clear about this, but the butterfly represents a child, a girl particularly, enjoying her carefree childhood until something or someone ends it. Do we have an answer to what that means? That's rhetorical. Like I said earlier, you can take this any way you want, as long as there's contextual evidence. Moving on, so the butterfly girl is dead, and her killer is still out there, and everyone's on the hunt for him. I try to make the assailant as charming and yet deceiving as possible, because a lot of predators who stalk our neighborhoods live in our neighborhoods. The call is coming from inside the house. I can't tell you how many headlines and stories I've read of mostly women and children being preyed upon and assaulted by those they've trusted, and what pisses me off is the forgiveness the attacker gets from the community because of how many good things they've done. I'm sorry, I refuse to be in the same room with someone who is preying on me. I don't care how much of a philanthropist they are. When it's learned that this community man is a suspect, everyone wants him out until they start to see the trail and realize that a predator was unmasked. So they execute him, but even his death doesn't heal the wound left behind. A child is still dead. Innocence was taken away from these people, and this town doesn't feel safe. You're probably wondering why this poem is called Daisy, and not only does the butterfly drink from a daisy, or do daisies grow around a stone, but the girl is named Daisy. Coincidence! It's kind of hard to bounce back from that anger in a singular poem, but I felt that this poem needed resolve. I feel that with a lot of poems I write, especially when writing a story in them. An afterthought in this poem is a need for a stronger sense of community, and not everyone is who you think they are. Don't only watch out for yourself, watch out for others too. When the bell tolls, haunting. I wanted to go spooky, and this poem reminded me of Coraline. A little more play on words and working with rhyme. Get fun with it, bend the rules. I learned from art class in elementary school that rules are always changing. I never really knew what that meant until I got into writing and poetry, especially these 2 books. I like writing about horror and supernatural elements. By the way, I'm on season 3 of Supernatural, and it's one of the funniest and scariest shows ever, and I love it. And so this poem I had in mind was the beldam from Coraline, and how she will never let you go, and then you have to break that cycle. Dark neon dreams. I think this is the first time I wrote a ghazal outside of class, and it's not a poetic form that many people are familiar with, so I'll define it. A ghazal is a poem where each stanza consists of 2 lines, and the final word of each second line is the same. Only the first 2 lines rhyme. Ghazals are usually love poems, usually unrequited. But this one is not so much that. I remember in poetry class in undergrad we read about ghazals and pontoons, which I'll get into later. I recall wanting to turn a ghazal into a sound experience with the little word of sound in the piece. Also, a band called Dayseeker released a song called Neon Grave. I don't listen to Dayseeker, but I did like the title of that song, so I wrote the title Neon Dark Dreams, the original title for this poem. As I was editing and organizing the poems, I didn't feel right with the word placement, because how can something dark be neon? Of course, the word dark is describing the dream. A dark dream sounds like a nightmare to me. Why did I need this neon nightmares? Whatever. This was more disorienting, especially with the word phantasmagoria in the mix.
Midnight Phantasmagoria!
This wasn't a love story between 2 people, but more of a your actions have consequences and you're killing us. It's a divide, a battle between brain and heart, literally. The final few lines are the process of getting a pacemaker. Now I want to give a little lore about myself, as this poem does describe some events in my life. Back in high school, in 9th grade, I was absent from school for 2 weeks, leading up to spring break. I wasn't sure if a lot of people knew where I was or even cared to know. Whatever, that was like 10 years ago. So the reason I was gone for 2 weeks was because I was hospitalized for sleep apnea. Sleep apnea is when your breathing is obstructed during sleep and affects the rest of your body. In my case, my heart was stopping for a few seconds in the night. I once told a classmate about this and he's like, "So you're a zombie?" Anywho, my heart and sleep apnea have improved since then, but I may have insomnia, mostly. Definitely not insomnia cookies, which are just a tad too sweet, and are insomnia cookies because they are open late. I am not sponsored by them. Repetition can be a bit annoying, especially when the poem has to revolve around the word sound, so I got a little fun with it. The Long Island Sound, that's fun. I've never been there, but the closest I've been there was Manhasset, where I was born. Something I also want to talk about is the beginning with unraveling the coil and the serpent unbound. I'm sure most of us are familiar with the story of Adam and Eve and how the snake represents temptation in some way. So I unraveled the snake from its coil, which I saw to be a film reel. I thought of a film reel because I imagined this whole poem to be like a neo-noir, cyberpunk kind of theme, mostly neo-noir. Think of John Wick and how light is used in that respect, or horror films maybe and how they use colors. I guess you could say this is my screenwriter mind coming into play and also my mind as an artist. And I also wanted to show how the decisions we make with our mind, we consciously make decisions that end up affecting the rest of us. And it's so bad to the point that our bodies will tell us, "Hey, stop, you're killing us." Glitch, one of the most experimental. The structure itself is disorienting as we're going from voice to voice to voice. The left voice is the speaker who cannot sleep. The center voice is the brain doing its thing because the body does not stop during rest. And the right voice is the nightmare/dream. You may start to sense a bit of a theme here. I'll get into more of that later. I want to put the performance in performance poetry. I wanted to get creative. Don't be afraid to step out of your comfort zone. Get crazy. I put a little sci-fi in this with the whole mission control of the body. The visuals for this was a little more taxing, more for my program than it was for me, but it's all worth it. Like before, this poem deals with sleep apnea, nightmares, insomnia, and heart problems. I get a little personal. That's it for this video. As you can tell, some of these poems sort of led into the other, kind of like how songs and an album tend to reference each other or segue into the other. I don't remember if this was intentional, but it helped with organizing the poems. The rest were a bit more difficult to sort out, but we found places for them. I hope you enjoyed this video. I love opening up to my work because it offers not only me, but other people the opportunity to learn about different experiences and possibly discover that they are not alone. We all have baggage. We all have a closet. And we gotta clean it up because it can get hella smelly and crowded. DETHROEZ was my rage piece, as much as Kaleidoscope also offer that outlet as well. I mean, every piece I write that isn't academic is released for me because I don't have much friends and I don't do well with therapy. And putting my experiences into my characters allows me to look into myself and go through a metamorphosis, so to speak. More poems are coming, and I will have videos on other topics as well. It's been a busy few weeks, and I'm still catching up. I hope you all have a wonderful day or night. Be safe and hydrate. Bye!